It's back. He hits two back. He's done it. Sharma has done it. And the end, delirious.
Hello and welcome to The Last Wicket, a cricket podcast for the most passionate cricket fan in you. I'm your host, Benny, and I'm joined by a couple of friends, Mayank.
Hey everyone.
And Nish.
Hello, everyone.
Unfortunately, our co-host Himanish won't be available this episode as he has to spend just a little bit more time this weekend decoding the mysteries of the universe. Still, we soldier on. This week, we will be speaking with journalist Raghu Kesavan, who recently wrote an article for The Wire titled Siraj, Sundar, and Natarajan are the real representatives of New India. So we talked to him about the Indian identity shift over the last 2 decades, the desire to claim collective success as our own, and for some reason, we talk about Chelsea and Arsenal. And later in the episode, we're going to have a special IPL themed trivia contest. I use the word contest lightly because there are no real prizes in the end, just the smug satisfaction of knowing IPL trivia slightly better than the rest of us. But first, since our last episode, England went on to win the first test against India in a dominating fashion. Mayank, do you have some quick thoughts on how the series has started?
It's been really fascinating. I honestly didn't feel that it would match up to India-Australia, and I think it's still a step below India-Australia, but it's going to be a really good series because India has a few injuries, which make them slightly weak, and England seem really well prepared, probably best that they've ever been.
Nish?
Yeah, it's been quite a surprising week, given the expectations surrounding this series that India would romp home 4-0 and all those, lofty predictions. So it's really good to see England put up a fight, and not just put up a fight, log in a comprehensive win. 6 wins away now for England at a stretch, which is awesome and bodes well for the future of the series.
I maintain that if India had won the toss, it probably would have been a completely different result. Because I think with Root, Stokes, and all of those guys piling on like 578 runs, I think that really broke the Indian team. But I feel if India had batted first and put up a large score, there would have been confidence would have been high for even like the support bowlers like Nadeem and Sundar. But yeah, impressive win. I don't want to take anything away from the English team. I was thinking that they're not putting Broad in the first choice 11, or they don't have Bairstow, and I was more focused on who they don't have. But the players that they did have did pretty good, especially Sibley. He, especially on the first day, he did a great job, and they had that cushion of runs, even though they didn't hit 200 in the second innings. That was enough for them to seal that win. I think it was too much to expect like another encore with like a last day chase. At the back of my mind, I was like, come on, Rishabh, come on, you can do it. You can do this 2 tests in a row. But I think sometimes sometimes we lose. And I remember, Nish, you were joking, like I think the last episode, or I think the first episode actually, that India will never lose a test again. And I said, I'm sure they're going to lose the next one. And that ended up happening.
We should probably go to Vegas, or you should probably go to Vegas, Benny.
Yeah, right.
It basically means we can blame Benny whenever India loses.
Yes.
That's right, man. We have a scapegoat in our team here.
I'll take it. I'll take that blame. Our guest this week is a journalist who writes on politics and sports for the online publication, thewire.in. We're going to talk to him about his recent article that came out right after the heady series win down under for Ajinkya Rahane and men. He is a fan of Arsenal, Rafael Nadal, and interestingly, the Indian cricket team, depending on whom they're playing. So Raghu Kesavan, welcome to The Last Wicket.
Thanks for having me on.
So Raghu, let's start with that last line I mentioned in your introduction. A fan of the Indian cricket team, depending on whom they're playing. Is there a story there?
Not really a story as much as I just have a soft spot for the West Indies or some of the weaker teams like Bangladesh. I think I support the underdog as much as possible. So it doesn't feel right sort of being a raging sort of India fan if we're smashing, Bangladesh around 600 or something like that. I'm incredibly partisan when it comes to us playing England or Australia or South Africa. But the others I can't really get G'd up about it.
Okay. I mean, I get it a little bit. I mean, if the Indian team is playing against West Indies, I can understand because you like the players individually. I mean, I like the players individually. I want them to do well.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any situation where I would not support India.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it's I don't really end up watching those series very closely either. I think it's also just more generally there are, I think, like you said, there are players that I like. I like
Right.
Bumrah, I like Pujara, I like Gill a lot. But I'm not a huge fan of the sort of in your face, chest thumping cricket that
Right.
we've been playing these.
Yeah.
I am a fan of it. I am a fan of it when it's against the Australians. But it feels like punching down when it's against some of the other teams.
Yeah, well, we'll get into a little bit of that later. But Raghu, I wanted to say that we wanted to have you on the show because we really enjoyed your article. You captured the essence of how the national identity for Indians is best reflected through some of the newest cricket stars in the Indian team. But before we get into it, could you give us a brief overview of your article for the benefit of those who haven't read it yet, and how you came upon the idea of writing it?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was sort of sparked off by this by something that happened in the run up to the series in Australia. In a column, Greg Chappell wrote that Virat Kohli is the most non-Australian cricketer to ever tour the country. And Kohli was asked about this at a press conference, and he said something like, it's not about me being Australian. I represent the new India. Right. And completely coincidentally, I'd been doing some reading around representation as a political concept. I'm trying to write something about it, and I got stuck. So this seemed like a sort of happy coincidence, a way to use all of that stuff that I'd thought of or put together in a sort of ready-made argument. I sort of knew what I wanted to say. There were lots of examples that I could use. There was some history. And of course, we got off to a disastrous start. So, the article was conceived during that Adelaide test. So it evolved over the course of the series.
I don't know what you're talking about. I wiped that from my memory.
Yeah, no, because, there was a line that I had to read because I said we should, I said something like we should resist easy jokes about what the Adelaide result says about the prognosis for Kohli's New India. But of course, as the series went on, this became less and less appropriate. So I had to come up with a slightly different way of making the argument. But no, I mean, so a brief overview of the piece, you can sort of think about it in three sections. It focuses on a general question initially, which is how do national teams represent their countries at all? It's, I think, one of those questions that people assume an answer to because it's usually not explicitly asked in those terms. You often hear players say that, it's an honor to represent my country, but we don't really ask what it is about them that makes them representative.
Right.
The one argument that I thought most people would agree with is that national teams are supposed to represent the best players that a country could muster to represent them, and sort of slightly paradoxically, them being the best, the best Indian cricketers or the best West Indian cricketers or the best English footballers makes them representative. That's the relationship. It's based on merit. Right. And then I go through some examples of why this might not necessarily be the case. And the sort of unsexy answer is that national teams are basically representative because they're the only game in town. That there is usually a body like the BCCI or Cricket Australia or whoever that says, look, this is the team that represents the country, and that's what makes them representative. Which is what leads to the second bit of the piece, which is, which sort of starts off with the idea that this is slightly unsatisfying. There's something, it doesn't really capture why people watch sport or why they find it entertaining. We're not talking about institutional arrangements or administrative decisions. People, really derive meaning from sport. And the example I use to illustrate the sort of what you could think of as a more cultural form of representation is how Diego Maradona represented Argentinian football.
Right.
But there are examples closer to home. I mean, if you think of the little thrill of pride we all feel as Indian fans when somebody says that Indian batsmen are great players of spin, or when somebody will comment on the risky technique of subcontinental batsmen. There's no reason why any of us as fans should feel pride at this. But I don't know about you guys, but I feel a little glow every time somebody says, Indian batsmen are great players of spin. We turn these sort of sporting quirks into national heirlooms almost.
Yeah, almost like we
And
just accepted that Indians are, because that's what I grew up believing too. We
yeah,
hear about Azharuddin, VVS Lakshman, wristy players who spin. That's what all the Australian commentators would talk about, the English commentators. And then, like more recently, whenever Indians struggle against spin, it's almost like, but we are supposed to be really good players of spin. Why are
yeah,
we struggling?
yeah. And and these are, and the stories are rooted in fact, that Indian pitches aren't conducive to fast bowling, so our batsmen grow up playing spin, right? So
Right.
there's always some, like a sort of material base to these things, but they do take on a life of their own, and they're sort of encapsulated in little moments. So I'm sure we can all remember Sidhu charging down the wicket to Warne, smashing him over his head. It's sort of, in my mind, it's sort of, a little gem of a memory about, and it sort of exemplifies this legend that we have about Indian cricket.
Right.
And that's really, I think the meat of sporting representation. I mean, I think that's the kind of, those stories, those myths, if you want, those legends are what constitute constitute this kind of representation. And then the final section of the piece, which sort of deals with the specific question, which is, does Kohli represent a new India? Is the sort of argument that I wanted to make, because you could see very clearly what he meant. He sort of means this aggressive chest out cricket, where we're not deferential or apologetic, which I think are unfair characterizations of Indians in the past. And it's what the Australians recognize as well, right? I mean, so if you think back to the last series we played there, or if you guys have watched that Amazon show that they made about Cricket Australia, the test, there are 2 episodes that concern that series, the 2018-2019,
Right.
where these guys just all of him. They're like, Kohli, Justin Anger's like, Kohli might be the best I've ever seen. And, this is a guy who has Steve Smith playing in his team.
Yeah.
So it's there's clearly something there about the way he approaches the game, which is new, not just to us, but to other people as well. But the question, of course, is, does he represent a new India? And this, for some reason, brought me back to, when I was a kid watching that great batting lineup, which went from, Sehwag to Dravid, Lakshman, Ganguly, Tendulkar. And that period of cricket from sort of 2001 onward, where it really did seem like a deliberate effort was made to change how we played the game. And there are sort of little moments that you can think of, Ganguly making Steve Waugh wait for the toss, or him taking his shirt off and waving it around on Lord's balcony.
Yes.
All of these things were like, there's sort of moments, and I couldn't really place it. I couldn't come up with like a clinching argument until I trolled through Ganguly's book, and he just says it. He just straight out says that I'd seen the body language of foreign players and their captains, and I thought we should mimic it. And so that's the sort of cricket side of it. The new India side of it, because this is of course a two-way relationship. Representation always involves somebody who represents and the represented. The new India side of it, is slightly more difficult. It's more nebulous. But the reason I think this kind of thing finds traction is because there is a sense in which there are insecurities or anxieties about how India faces outwards to the world. And not seeming sort of deferential or meek, I think, was important to people then as it is now. And I think cricket sort of became a vehicle for that.
Right.
So when Kohli said that, I represent New India, there is a sense in which, perhaps he does represent this kind of anxiety, this kind of needing to seem, and it also plays into, ideas of masculinity and things like that, which, we can get into later. But in the piece, what I end with is, there's an alternative New India that you could think about coming out of this series, right? There's all of these young players who we'd never seen before, some of whom have had really sort of unlikely journeys into cricket, into Test cricket especially. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was how many of them seem to have cut their teeth in the IPL, which really seems to have been one of the few places in public life where, liberalization, which I think sparked all of this off in '92, where liberalization has really paid off, where, it's genuinely delivered prosperity for a much larger number of cricketers than could have made a living before playing the game. So I think that, I think it's more interesting to think about something structural that we've done well, where we've set up scouting networks where, new talent is recognized, and you can see the effects of it, rather than sort of rooting, ideas of New India, or if you want to think of it in those terms. I don't think it's hugely helpful, but rather than rooting those kinds of ideas in 20-year-old anxieties about our place in the world.
So thanks for joining us, Raghu. So I think one of the things that came to mind when I was reading your piece was, before obviously Kohli mentioning that comment, we've had a lot of really good cricketers from small towns. There's MS Dhoni, there's been, Manaf Patel, Bhuvneshwar Kumar, Mohammad Shami. All of these people have played for a decade, and Dhoni specifically, was captain even before Kohli had made his place permanent. So how do you think that those people were different from today's youngsters, whether it's Siraj, whether it's any of the new ones?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really think they're different in any sense that really has an impact on the argument. I think what I would say is that the depth of Indian cricket is new. That the depth of quality that we can field, as evidenced by this series, does seem to me to be new, especially our fast bowling depth. I think that's an unprecedented state of affairs in Indian cricket, to have such bench strength amongst our fast bowlers. But no, I mean, I don't think that I don't think that these things. I don't think there's any sudden break. I think that these things happen slowly over time, and occasionally you'll have moments like this where it seems like from between yesterday and today there's a huge difference. But I think that the effect is cumulative, it's not a sort of on and off switch. So I think that the success of provincial cricketers before has obviously, I think it's obviously helped, and I think it's a good thing. I think that the point that we should take away from all of this is that I think that is something that we should build on. There was lots of stuff coming out of the sort of fallout from this series, where there were Australians. Langer said it himself afterwards. That if it's 1.5 billion people, the 11 that get selected are going to be pretty good. And I think it was Gideon Haigh on his podcast who said that that we've all been saying for years, if India really took advantage of its the demographic quote unquote advantage that they have, Indian cricket would be unstoppable. I mean, I think part of this is sour grapes, but part of it is also true that that there must be a lot of talent that we do miss out on, that isn't picked up by Ranji scouting networks or IPL scouting networks, or people just don't get the chance to play because there are barriers to entry which have nothing to do with talent or your will to play the game. So I mean, to answer your question, I think it's a sort of continuation of the great players like Sehwag or Dhoni who we've seen in the past, and long may it continue.
And I think one interesting point that I was thinking about as I was reading it was, it's not like we've not had, in-your-face cricketers before. We've had them, and, they've been part of, good Indian sides. And the last one that comes to mind is Gautam Gambhir, who had, 3 phenomenal years as test opener in 2008 to 2010. And he was definitely like that. He didn't care. He would be happy to elbow the opposition like he literally did. And that sort of tactics. But it's very clear that it's probably the first time that we've had a leader who's so, outspoken in a way, and which is why there's a lot of focus on this aspect. Even though in my mind, in the last 20 years or so, we've seen more and more, as you said, continuation of people coming from smaller towns and, from more backgrounds which are, that they have very few things going on in their families and things like that, but they fight all those odds and make their way through. So I think it's a combination of that aspect as well, that we have a cricketer who's right in the center, and he's been very good for a very long time as compared to Gambhir, who was very good but for a short period of time.
So yeah, I mean that's an interesting example. I mean, I guess who are the others? I mean, who are the others who you could think of who would sort of fit this kind of description?
I would think Saurav Ganguly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Ganguly was the one I thought of.
Yeah, and Ganguly definitely fits that, and there's more than one reason he fits that. He was also, as Jeffrey Boycott called him, the Prince of Kolkata, and because he came from a very different background, where he was from a very rich family, which is an absolute opposite of pretty much everybody in that Fab Five lineup. If you think about Dravid, Lakshman, Tendulkar, Sehwag, Kumble, none of them came from a very rich background. They were well educated, yes, but none of them came from a posh family as Ganguly did. which I know is not the story of Kohli, but from an attitude-wise, it definitely seems similar.
So I think it's interesting because I agree with you that this kind of cricket has a sort of genealogy. There are you can trace it back. I trace it back to Ganguly. Gambhir is a good example. I think the important thing is to be able to back it up, right? Like with Ganguly, my sense was that it often came across as petulant. That he was angry, but he was unsure why he was angry, or he sort of felt that he had to be, but it felt put on to me. I'm not sure. It didn't seem like.
I mean, it reflected, to me at least, it showed or reflected a sense of entitlement more than anything else.
Yeah, possibly. And I mean, so there's a good piece a couple of years ago by Jared Kimber in the Cricket Monthly, where he talks about sort of the history of sledging in the Australian game and how nasty club cricket in Australia can be, and how they sort of all bred to play in this way. So when people get to the test side, they're sort of surprised at how sort of gentle the game is compared to their sort of apprenticeships that they've served in lower tiers of Australian cricket. And I really think that at that time, because Waugh's team had perfected this sort of mental disintegration thing, where they would go out deliberately to try to break you down through aggression and sledging. I think people started thinking that this was the way to win. And it worked for the Australians because they did win. But it's not clear to me that we've had any success until Kohli playing this kind of cricket. That the aggression was disconnected from our success or failure. That it was just a sort of add-on. I think with Kohli, he genuinely can, because he's enormously gifted. It genuinely seems like he can bend games to his will. He can sort of go out and be like, I'm not going to get out today, or I'm going to score 100 today. And it's obviously not the case, but there is an impression that sort of reality bends around him because he wants it to. And I think that gives this kind of cricket more, an air of plausibility that it potentially didn't have under, with Gambhir or under Ganguly.
Yeah, I just wanted to, kind of like, ask or talk about this point, right? Kohli, like you mentioned, Raghu, his talk, is often backed by his skills as well. But at the same time, I think one thing that we should consider is Ganguly also had the same talk, and it's arguable that if he had the same skill, probably not. But the game in Kohli's age has been completely industrialized when compared to Ganguly's age, right? And he's sort of a player who's at the right time, at the right place, sort of thing as well. Because India produces an assembly line of talent, so all of his talk and brashness or whatever positive exterior he projects is also backed up by not only his skill but also the game that India has today, and it's at the grassroots level, right? So wouldn't you say that's a big proponent in kind of like peddling this whole new India front?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think that is what we should focus on. That we are a much better prepared sort of cricketing nation. Because we produce better cricketers, not because we produce angrier cricketers, right, or more aggressive cricketers, right? Like I think that those two things are disconnected.
Yeah, and Mish, I completely agree with your point, because I think Raghu was mentioning that we've had Steve Waugh's Australia, which did the mental disintegration and all of that, and all their tactics, and they were successful. But at the heart of it, they were successful because they were a really, really good Australian team.
Yeah. Exactly.
That mental disintegration might have, pushed a team over the edge in a few scenarios, but they played ridiculously good cricket for the most part, and that was good enough for most. So I think that's a point that people often miss.
One of the things that I find most exciting about this batting lineup that we've got now, that finally potentially we have an answer to the Australian combination of Hayden at the top of the order and Gilchrist at the bottom of the. We have a tank at the top and a berserker to come in at the end. We've got our own birds. I mean, we don't have a tank, but Shubman Gill looks amazing. I mean, he looks
right. Absolutely.
He looks like the finished article at this stage of his career. It's rare.
He really does. And I love Pant. I mean, he's just so entertaining. I can't wait to watch what happens tomorrow. If he stays in for an hour, we'll be golden.
I'll take 250.
All I'm asking is 30 minutes of pure punt madness. That's all we want.
Yeah, I just want Leach to pitch it in the rough, see where it goes.
The other thing that I've always wondered, and I know you're not any closer to the team than we are, but just a thought that I've always had is the impact that this sort of coverage has on other players. So there's a lot of focus on these, whether it was Ganguly in that day, whether it was Gambhir during his brief stint, or Kohli now, there's a lot of focus on that. And you mentioned the test, right? Even in the test, they keep talking about Kohli as if there's not a good batsman other than that in that lineup, when that obviously wasn't true. So I'm just trying to think like what impacts, both positive and negative, that could have on a team, and what everybody's thoughts are on that.
Yes, I mean, I just briefly on this, because I don't have any great insight into this, but I think that this series in Australia was good for the Indian cricket team, because not having Kohli there, I think, allowed other players to step up and shoulder some responsibility. And then they also won, so they learned that they could do it without him. Which, now that he's back, you sort of have both the benefits of having his talent in the team, and also having a team that doesn't feel like the sky has fallen on their heads when he gets out. Because I don't know about you guys, but I think that there was a sense before the series in Australia that once Kohli left, it would be a formality.
Oh, I believe that.
Right? No, I believe that as well, exactly. And had the series not happened, and had Kohli got out the way he did today to Moeen Ali, I would have felt much worse about it. I would have felt that, oh God, we've lost 3 wickets. Nothing's gonna. But now you feel differently. Now you feel like the other players might pick up the slack. I think most importantly, they feel like they can pick up the slack because they've done it.
Right.
So I think these things are difficult to make sort of categorical judgments about, because I think they change over time, and events have an impact. Like this, I think, has had an impact. But I think currently we're in a good place. I think we get to have him in the team. I think he made 2 good 70s in the last few innings. But when he gets out cheaply, the rest just carry on.
Right. And I think also, I don't think it's detrimental. Like all the attention on Kohli I don't think it's necessarily detrimental to the rest of the team, because I think he absorbs all of the media focus on himself, and it allows the other players to kind of do their thing, just do what they need to do. And I think we saw that reflected in the Australia series after Kohli was gone, and especially after that 36 all out, it was almost like, well, what are we going to expect from these guys anymore anyway? And I don't know, I just feel, and especially after that Rahane as captain, it just felt like the personality of the team changed, at least for those 3 tests where they just played freely with no fear of losing. It was just, I think that a team does take the shape of the person who's leading it, right? So under Rahane, it was a transformed team is what I felt, because under Kohli, it was always going to be focused on him. So I think overall, the focus on Kohli, and I don't think he minds it either, as long as they stay focused on him and the rest of the players can just go about their job, I think it works for the Indian team.
Now, the only comment I was going to make was, I think that definitely, I don't think Kohli minds it at all. I think he's, in fact, in some interviews, he's said that it actually motivates him to do even better. And I remember that if you guys have read and followed Cricket Couch on Twitter, he's talked about when he was covering a series for Cricinfo or some publication, he was in the elevator with Kohli, and he sort of passed a comment saying, "You've not scored 100 since 11 ODIs. That's kind of lean for you." This was 2-3 years ago. Next game he scored 100, and he saw him again in the lobby, and he said, "How about now?" or something to that sort. So it definitely eggs him on. So he is that kind of character, and I find it fascinating, because in my mind, the way I function, I crumble under pressure right away. So I think that sort of psyche is just something else. And I do think it shields some of the players, as you said, where, they can just go about their business and there's less focus. My only counterpoint to that, and again, this is me just thinking through what possibly happens in that mode, is somebody like a Hardik Pandya. Like I don't think he's another one who doesn't mind the limelight, So I don't know how it impacts players like that. That would be my only question. And again, we probably won't have any definitive insight, unless we talk to them directly or talk to somebody around the team.
Sounds like Kohli is like in football analogy, he's like a reverse Mourinho. He kind of like, takes all the attention off players but doesn't deliver.
So Raghu, there's a line in your article, or you framed this question: how do sporting teams represent their nations at all? That is an interesting question for sure, because I've always struggled to dissociate from, for lack of a better word, perceived ownership of the team. So when I talk about the Indian team, I always say we won or we sucked, not the Indian team won. It's funny. My wife used to make fun of me and ask, whenever I say something like that, she'd be like, "Why are you playing for the Indian team?" But I suspect that there are many people like me. Why do you think we're quick to adopt sporting teams as an entity that is accountable to us as fans?
I mean, I think there's lots of interesting work on this, but I think that part of the reason is that one of the things that I sort of briefly touch on in the article is about how national sporting teams are part of how national identity is constructed.
Right.
So that ownership that you're talking about is basically that overlap of and the reason why it's such a potent combination, the sort of sport and the nation, is because it sort of brings together all of these. I don't know how do you sort of phrase it, but basically it brings together a bunch of people who are very good at the things that all young men want to be good at. Right? All of us grow up wanting to be good at cricket or football, and at the same time they sort of I say when I'm talking to my friends about my English friends about this, I say your lot or you guys when I refer to their teams. But I basically I think it's evidence of the fact that these teams are in fact representative of the countries that they claim to represent. How that happens is, I think, the more interesting question. I think that like I say in the piece, political representation, there is an easy how. We know how MPs or congressmen or prime ministers represent us because there is a mechanism there, right? We elect them. But there's no similar mechanism in sports. We're not the guys who select the team. We don't have any say in what they do. So I think the mechanism of representation is more opaque. But as you point out, the fact that we all slip into the collective we when we talk about the team, I think is proof that they do represent us.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of both of your points here, right? This collective we, right? Like, for example, Raghu, you're not going to like this, but I've forged an identity with Chelsea, way back in 2000 under Ranieri, right? So every time Chelsea play, I get really passionate, not as passionate as when the Indian team plays because there's a deeper connection or deeper roots. But every time Chelsea do well or, do poorly, I tell my brother that, hey, we lost today or we won. He goes like, how are you connected to a club in London? It's like you have no connection. But then, as you grow older, you understand the mechanics of sport, right? How it's like we live in a globalized world, right? So the distance between me in India to a club in London is shrunk. It's almost non-existent, right? So, and then that's one point. That's why we want to associate with different clubs and different teams, etc. And ultimately, we're all wired to win, right? Like nobody wants to lose or perform poorly intentionally, right? Like, so that's one of the reasons why we just use these teams as vicarious experiences for us to enjoy the ride while they're doing well. And sometimes that's why you see the fair weather fans, right? They kind of switch out when they lose and switch to a different team, because ultimately the common cause is we all want to win, right? The vehicle that delivers that feeling doesn't really matter. But then, of course, you reach a point where that matters too. So you stick with the team or the club through thick and thin. Is my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that supporting a football club is interesting. So one of the interesting things that has happened, I think, over the last 20 years with the way, with the change in club ownership, with the increasing sort of globalization of the game of club football, and the increasing sense that the bigger clubs don't really have an identity beyond being, these massive corporate machines that have to make money. I think for myself, as like you in the early 2000s, for absolutely no good reason, completely randomly, because my best friend was an Arsenal fan, I became an Arsenal fan.
Yeah.
That is literally it. He spent 2 years in London, and he became an Arsenal fan because the first jersey he bought happened to be a Bergkamp jersey. It was, it's a completely random chain of events. But I know for myself that over the last, 10 years, since Arsene Wenger left, my attachment to the club has sort of changed, because there was a story you could tell yourself that, Arsenal plays a certain way. They play attractive football. They promote young players. Why are these things important? These things are important because, suddenly you've incorporated them into your identity as a fan. And because these are corporate behemoths which don't care about your identity as a fan, these things can go away. Right? And suddenly you're a big spending club who spends 70 million on players you don't need, etc. But and suddenly you find yourself slightly unmoored because you're just like, what do I do with this new reality which my identity doesn't conform to? So national teams are easier to follow in this continuous way because the sort of the stories you tell yourself are more durable, and there are certain fundamental things that are more difficult to change, because national identity seems more permanent than the identity of these clubs which don't have your interests or your preferences as their top priority. So I think, there's another sense in which I'm not sure that national identity is very different from this kind of club fandom. I mean, it's constructed in the same way. We buy into it, we think it's real because we are brought up that way, and that it's cultural, it forms a bigger part of our lives. But things could change very quickly, and then suddenly you find yourself in a new reality which doesn't conform with what you think your national identity is. So I think these things are changeable. I think a large part of being a fan is sort of telling yourself stories and hoping that reality conforms to the ones you've told yourself.
So Raghu, you talk about this combination of aspiration and insecurity that permeated Indian cricket, particularly towards the late 1990s. And the phenomena of cherishing overseas wins while disregarding wins at home. I mean, that still continues to this day. So,
Yeah.
And not just in cricket, though, right? It seems to permeate every aspect of society. That is the reason why there are YouTube channels where Americans or Europeans will record reaction videos to everything from Indian movie trailers to Indian food, and these have huge followings. And that is a reason why most Indians want to claim a piece of every successful Indian or Indian origin person who makes it big on the global stage. And I feel that a strong sense of Indian identity seems to rely on what foreigners say about them. Would you agree with that? Do you think this colonial hangover will eventually drop off?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if it'll drop off, but I mean, I think the way I thought about it was sort of historically, because what you say is true. With evidence of it. They're all not in India talking about Indian history and Indian sport. So I definitely think that there is a sense that there is opportunity abroad. I know that growing up, my friends and I would always talk about the possibility of living somewhere else for a while, and it was something to aspire to, something that we thought would be good. Life would be better in various undefined ways. I think that the interesting thing that sort of writing this made me think about was what sort of change did an event like liberalization have on the way we thought about how we orient ourselves outwardly. So, I think that pre-1992, or, let's say my dad's generation of people grew up with the sense that, things were different abroad, but they were different in a way that wasn't necessarily something that you could replicate, right? Like it wasn't as, I think, the world was less globalized. It was less easy to travel abroad, less easy to stay in touch with people back home.
Right.
Moving would involve, setting up a new life completely. There was, you couldn't WhatsApp people at all or things like that. And I think that what liberalization did is that it opened us up to, cultural products from abroad, and the sense, and in a sense, it brought us closer to what was happening in the rest of the world. And I think when it brought us closer, it also sort of made the possibility of copying that more real. So if you're different, but you're quite far away from the thing that you see as desirable, you don't await the idea in your mind of trying to replicate it, because it's unattainable. But
Right.
I think when you get a bit closer to it, there is a sense in which this breeds the anxiety that I was talking about, because suddenly you can aspire to those, that standard of living or consumption of the same kinds of cultural products, or, foreign holidays, or, moving abroad, or all kinds of things like that. So I think that this reflected something that's always existed in cricket, which is, the sort of gold standard for cricket batting for batting cricket has always been batting against good fast bowlers on pitches that are friendly to fast bowling.
Right.
I think that's partly, a colonial thing, But I think it's partly a cricket thing. Like I think fast bowling is just exhilarating, and good fast bowling is just to face. It's the toughest
Right.
test the batsman has to face. There are great spinners. There have been great spinners, and some of them are incredibly difficult to face. But I think that element of danger isn't there. I think that there is some sense in which ideas of masculinity are tied into this as well. It requires a certain amount of bravery to be able to stand in front of somebody who's bowling at 90, 95 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I think that is just baked into the game. I think that until there is a possibility that India starts producing fast bowling pitches and good fast bowlers, and that then wins at home. That'll be the test case. That if suddenly we have our own domestic equivalent of the Gabba, and we produce our own battery of incredibly fast 90-mile plus bowlers.
That'll be the day.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that
we're getting there. We're getting there.
Comparison. Yeah, no, exactly. I think that there is a recognition that we can do it, and it would be interesting to see in that case whether wins abroad were still ranked higher than wins at home. I think that it would be slightly different.
Coming to the crux of your article, you state that the new generation of Indian cricketers personified by the likes of Mohammad Siraj, Washington Sundar, Rishabh Pant, T. Natarajan, and so on, these players are the true face of modern India, one that does not have to borrow the identity of another country or another cricket team. And you're right, they're definitely not what Greg Chappell would call Australian, non-Australian cricketers. But from an Indian context, does their success demonstrate that cricket is this, great leveler, or does it just paper over the vast disparities and opportunities for cricketers from different socioeconomic backgrounds?
No, so I think that it sort of shows us the way forward, right? Like I think the reason why their stories are so powerful is because we recognize that sometimes talent isn't enough. That these guys made it not because they were talented, but also despite all of the other barriers that they had to overcome to play the game at the highest level. So I think it's important to recognize that there are barriers to entry to playing cricket, which are material sometimes. So, if Shardul Thakur had to travel, 6 hours a day to play cricket, they are material. If you can't buy the kit, if you can't afford to spend all that time playing cricket rather than working. So, talent itself is not enough. I think what I mean when I say that they represent the face of New India is that they represent what we should aspire to, which is to make cricket accessible to to people who don't necessarily come from wealth or who are comfortably off, so they can afford to pursue cricket as a vocation. And I think that the IPL has done, shows us part of the way forward because of the way it's forced people to look for talent elsewhere. But I definitely think it's sort of first step, not the end, not the destination.
Well, speaking of representation, this reminds me of Cricket South Africa's, controversial selection quota policy. So if followed strictly, they would never be able to put the best 11 on the park at all times, but it might just put up a more representative team. Do you think that could work in India, where, can we be conditioned to accept a more representative team than the best possible one?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's a choice, right? I mean, I think that the South African quota is that they have to have 6 players of color in their team on average over a year, right?
Right.
There's no reason why they couldn't have 11 and it'd be the best team that they could field, right? The point is that this kind of quota has an effect. It's not just that. Okay, so I mean, let me give you an example. I mean, why is, for example, the Bombay School of Batting so successful? It's not that there's something in the air in Bombay. It's that there is great coaching. There are formal and informal scouting networks. Talent is picked up very quickly, and it's then groomed so that those players can achieve their potential.
Right.
This is not available to everyone. So if you're not if you're from a rural area which doesn't have a history of cricket or excellence in cricket, you might be a genius, but you're not going to be picked up. So what we should try to do is expand access to the game to players who might be enormously talented, but just don't get picked up because there are other barriers to playing the game. So, if you want to talk about quotas. So I mean, it's a sort of two-step argument. If we're agreed that there are barriers to entry to playing cricket which are independent of your talent, so you're good enough, but there's something else that stops you playing the game. If we agree that those exist, and we're agreed simultaneously that quotas like the domestic player quota in the IPL have a developmental effect, as in they spur people to find talent that they hadn't previously reached out to, then what you're doing is you're just expanding your talent pool. So currently there are players who must be talented enough to play the game at the highest level, but are not able to for material reasons. And there is a mechanism through quotas that could force institutions like domestic teams to expand their scouting networks, because you would be forced to find players from say lower castes or socioeconomically weaker sections of society who otherwise don't get to play. I mean, Indian cricket's history with caste representation is not good. I mean, we don't. It's an upper caste sport. There's no reason that should be the case. It is the case because that's how caste works. It's about access to resources, to to the things that I was talking about, to coaching, to how you get picked up, to being able to afford to play the game. So I think that I think that if we accept, and it's an if, not everybody has to, but I think if you accept that the domestic player quota in the IPL has had this effect of making people reach out, find more talent, then that logic applies to any other team or any other sort of scouting network.
The one thing I would say is I was trying to think about the name of the program that BCCI had started many years ago, where, to Raghu's point, they were trying to scout players from places where they typically wouldn't have as many opportunities. And that I was just Googling the site, and it was the TRDW, which is the Talent Resource Development Wing. And many journalists of cricket, especially ones who've covered cricket for 20, 30 years, say that program was key in nurturing the potential talents such as MS Dhoni himself. So I think that's another piece which will sort of bring more and more cases where we see people like Siraj and people like Shardul who won't have to travel that long, and they'll have facilities and pitches in their smaller towns, or they'll have scouts who will at least take them to better facilities. Either way, so that'll probably help bridge the divide as well. But yeah, I mean, it definitely does come down to opportunities, and that's why traditionally we've seen the Mumbai and Delhi teams doing well, or Tamil Nadu doing well, because they've generally had better wickets, better preparation right from a young age.
And what I would also like to see is more cricketers from the Northeast India as well, like players from Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland. Like, I never hear of cricketers coming up from those regions, and I really wish, especially with IPL having been around for as long as it has been, that we would have some cricketers from there, just to kind of encourage development of cricket and cricketers there. And I think that would definitely make India a more representative, like the Indian team, a more representative team, if we're talking about that.
Yeah, and I think that, like you say, I think that that representation like this is a good in itself. But I think in the specific case of cricket, because things like quotas are a tough sell, right? Like they're unpopular. Because there's this thing about merit that the best players won't get in, as if cricket selection isn't rife with nepotism, from top to bottom.
Yeah.
But I think that the IPL has really shown us that there is untapped talent out there, that if we channel it properly, if we actually gave people the opportunities to play, it's a win-win. You get, like you say, a more representative team, but you also tap into talent which would otherwise, it would never cross their minds to play the game because it isn't feasible for so many other reasons.
Question?
I just wanted to say that this has been an eye-opening conversation. I learned a lot of things in the last hour and a half. So thank you, Raghu. Appreciate your time.
No, thanks very much, guys. So it's been great chatting. I look forward to listening to many more episodes of your podcast.
Well, Raghu, I want to thank you so much for agreeing, first of all, to come on our podcast and talking to us about your article. I want to end by saying that my favorite line was the last one in your piece. A cricket team can't redeem a nation, but it can represent the better angels of its nature. And, given all that is happening in India right now and all the expectations on Indian cricketers to be fearless role models outside of cricket as well, that is the best we can hope for. For our listeners, you can follow Raghu on Twitter at RaghuK71 and his writings on thewire.in. We'll also be putting up the link to his article in our podcast show notes and on our website. So please do give it a read. Raghu, thanks again, and we hope you come back on our show in the future.
Thanks very much, guys. I look forward to it.
Guys, the IPL is around the corner. I know that it feels like one just ended last month, but thanks to COVID-19, we are getting back-to-back IPL tournaments within a short span of time. Here at the Last Wicket, we are not complaining. We'll have plenty of special segments when the 2021 edition gets underway. And today, we have an IPL themed treat for you, specifically an IPL Trivia segment. So over to you, Nish.
Hello and welcome to the first ever IPL quiz, hopefully not the last. So I have curated a set of 10 questions that our participants, Benny and Mayank, will compete and try to win the prize of being extra knowledgeable in IPL. So the questions are, so before I dive into the questions, I will give you a quick overview of the rules. So both Mayank and Benny have a buzzword. So as soon as I read out the question, they will pretty much yell out the buzzword, and I'll be the adjudicator of the person who I'll decide whoever was the first to spell out their buzzword. And
Don't
depending on
worry,
that,
I don't think I'll be the first in any of these questions, but go on.
depending on that, I will offer the question to the person. And each person each question has a time limit of up to 10 seconds for which the answer has to be given to me. Are you ready, gentlemen?
So this is from spanning from IPL season 1.
Season 1 to all the current season.
All right, let's go.
Let's go down memory lane here. All right, you guys ready?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right, 3, 2, 1. The first question is as follows. Who holds the record for the best bowling figures for an individual?
Vivo.
All right, we have Vivo, which is the buzzword for Benny. Benny, your time starts now.
Sohail Tanvir.
Bam, that's wrong.
What? That's pretty sure.
Over to you, Mayank, and your time starts now.
Jasprit Bumrah.
Incorrect.
Wait. I think I know the answer. Do I get another go?
All right, now since both of you have answered correctly.
Yeah, give
so
the
it
options.
goes back to the person. Okay, the options are Lasith Malinga, Sohail Tanvir, Anil Kumble, Alzari Joseph.
Vivo.
Go ahead, Benny.
Alzari Joseph.
We have a winner. Our first ever IPL quiz
remember this
winner.
now. Guys, I
Our
think we
first
should
questions winner.
also mention that Mayank he has been staying away from the IPL for a few years, right? So
That's
I think
a very good point to bring up. So he's at a slight disadvantage.
That's an important point because it's important points because of two reasons. I watched it in the beginning, which is why my buzzword is DLF. And more importantly, I don't know any of the recent trivia.
Yeah, but yeah, so if he does win this by some chance, kudos to him. That would be very impressive. But he's at a slight disadvantage. So as long as that's
correct.
kept in mind.
So some context for his answer. Alzari Joseph in the 2019 season, he was actually making his debut replacing Adam Milne. And these figures kind of overtook Sohail Tanvir's 6 for 14 in the inaugural IPL in 2008. So, this record has been there for 11 years and until Alzari Joseph produced his phenomenal spin against Sunrisers Hyderabad. There's some context for the trivia question.
I think he lost his father just before the game or something of that sort too. I vaguely remember. So that made it all the more impressive. So yeah, champion bowler. He was really good, and I think because of injury, I think he missed the next edition. I think, but yeah, he's a very exciting young prospect for West Indies, and I think we'll see a lot more of him in the coming years.
Yeah, I just hope he leaves Mumbai Indians soon.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on with our quiz. Here, question 2. Against which team did Anil Kumble get his best figures of 5 for 5?
Vivo.
DLF.
We have Vivo, which is Benny. Benny, your time starts now.
This is more of a guess, but I feel like it was against Kings 11 Punjab.
Incorrect. Over to you, Mayank, and your time
DLF.
starts now.
Deccan Chargers.
Incorrect. All right, this is where I go into the options because our competitors are slacking here. um, okay, option 1 is Delhi Daredevils. Number 2, Chennai Super Kings. Number 3, Deccan Chargers. Number 4, Rajasthan Royals.
DLF,
All right, Mayank, go for it.
Delhi Daredevils.
Incorrect, Mayank.
Well, that
Any-
eliminates two, and I feel it's definitely not Chennai Super Kings because I feel like that would have been burnt into my memory. I think the only other
Drum roll.
option is Rajasthan Royals.
We have a winner.
Ah,
All right,
2
so
for
let me
2.
give you some. Benny's on a roll here for Mayank. It's okay, Mayank. You still have a chance to come back here and come back strongly. So yes, Anil Kumble did play the IPL. If you were wondering what the hell Anil Kumble was in IPL, he played against, or he took his best figures of 5 for 5 against Rajasthan Royals, and his victims were Yusuf Jadeja, Munaf Patel, Shane Warne, and Kamran Khan. And interesting trivia here. This match was actually played in Cape Town in the 2009 series where the IPL had to be to South Africa. And in this game, another legend from Karnataka scored 66 and won the man of the match. And it was none other than Rahul Dravid. That is correct.
I got that one. Does that count for something?
Yeah, just don't tell
I'll give you
Mike it's
half
an
a
actual
point.
question. Just tell Mike it's not a question, and then he'll be able to get the answer.
Yeah, Mayank, as previously stated in this podcast, he doesn't do well under pressure. So I'm just kidding, Mayank. All right, on to our fourth question.
Wait, it's a third one.
Oh, that's right. I don't know how to count. So our third question. This is pretty easy, I think. Let's see. Against which team did Dhoni walk onto the pitch to remonstrate against the umpires?
I know this answer. Maybe I should say Vivo first and spare Mayank the agony of not knowing it. But you should complete the question.
Oh.
Go ahead and complete the question.
Okay, yeah. So basically, Dhoni walked onto the pitch after he got a wrong decision, and he remonstrated with the umpires. Which was the team at the end of? Which was the team that Dhoni was facing that day?
So Vivo, first of all, and
Okay.
the answer is Rajasthan Royals.
Correct. 3 out of 3 for Benny.
See, I'm telling
Do
you,
do
anything
recall-
related to CSK, I'm telling you, I'll remember.
Do you recall the context behind this, Benny?
Um,
If not, I have it answered. I'm trying to see how much of a CSK fan
I'm thinking
you
it
are.
was a no ball. Was that ball to Jadeja or Santner? One of them.
Oh, that is very close. That's a great guess. You're very close. There was Ben Stokes to Santner. It was a no ball that was called, but after consultation with the line umpire Oxenford, the decision was reversed, which of course led MS Dhoni to, not happily, stroll onto the wicket and remonstrate with the umpires in only a way that Dhoni can do and get away with it. So yeah, and the decision was reversed, and CSK did go on to win that game.
You lost some fair play points.
Sometimes.
Very sad.
Oh yeah, but
I
at
have
the
to
end of the day,
remind the listeners. I have to remind the listeners. I run this podcast with 3 other CSK fans, which is not fair on me. It's a really hard quiz.
don't worry, Mayank. There are some Delhi questions in here that you may have a chance of, redeeming yourself. All right, question number 4. Question number 4. This is again related to batting. Chris Gale has hit over 300 sixes in IPL. Who has the most number of boundaries?
DLF,
All right, Mayank.
Suresh Raina.
No, Mayank, that's wrong, but it's not very wrong. Over to you, Benny.
I'm gonna say Gautam Gambhir.
No, that's incorrect as well. Man, you guys are
Oh, man.
disappointing.
I don't know, that was a wild guess.
Mayank, back to you.
Hey, what are the options?
And this time I will give the options. Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. Virat Kohli, Suresh Raina,
Wait.
Shikhar Dhawan,
Oh, okay, go
Rohit
ahead.
Sharma. And of course, we do know that Suresh Raina is incorrect, as that was.
Vivo,
Go ahead, Benny.
Rohit Sharma.
No, that removes
What?
2 options out of the 4.
Oh my
It's
god.
a 50-50% chance for Mayank. So,
Virat Kohli.
no, Mayank, you got the 50-50
Oh
wrong,
my
just like Virat Kohli's
God.
task capabilities. It is indeed Shikhar Dhawan with
Shikhar
591
Dhawan has the
boundaries.
most force in IPL history?
That is correct. Shikhar Dhawan has
Wow.
591 boundaries, followed by
That's
Virat Kohli at
mind-blowing.
503.
Yeah, that is, I cannot believe that's just crazy. But he has been
That is
around
pretty
forever.
crazy. Yeah, he has been around for a while, and more interesting is Suresh Raina has 493 after skipping an entire season. So that just speaks to the longevity of
Okay.
the guy's
I
IPL
mean, If you say
Weird.
IPL, the first player that I associate with IPL is Suresh Raina. Like more than Dhoni, more than Rohit Sharma. For
Mhm.
me, like he is like Mr. IPL for me.
That is true. That is true. All right. What are we at? We're at 3-0 for Benny, and Mayank has yet to open the count. All right. On to our fifth question. Who took the first hat trick in IPL, in all of IPL? Not hearing your
DLF.
sponsor's name. All right, Mayank.
Amit Mishra.
No, Mayank. It's a good guess, but it's not quite correct.
I'm gonna go for like a left field and say it was Rohit Sharma.
Not very left field because he does have a hat trick, but it's not him. Now I'll give you guys the options of Amit Mishra, which we already know is incorrect, Piyush Chawla, Lakshmipati Balaji, and Irfan Pathan.
Vivo.
Benny.
I just said Vivo. Hold on. Let me think.
He is
So
flouting the rules. That's a potential yellow card offense.
there's 10 seconds, right? Tell me when there's like 2 seconds left.
You have like 5.
Oh no. Now I'm not good under pressure. Irfan Pathan.
Incorrect. So 50-50 chance again from Mayank.
What were the options? I'm very confused.
So
Piyush
yeah, Amit
Chawla
Mishra, which was your first guess, which is incorrect. And then
Yeah.
Irfan Pathan was another guess, which is also an option by Benny, incorrect. So we're left with Piyush Chawla and Lakshmipati Balaji.
Oh no, I remember this.
I'm gonna go with
I
Balaji.
remember.
I'm gonna go with
Mayank
Balaji.
is off the mark. It's 3-1.
You know what?
Hooray, we need a jingle for that.
The moment you said Lakshmipati Balaji's second time, I remember because I think I remember the third wicket. I think it was like slogged in the air. In fact, I think it was Piyush Chawla that was the batsman. I feel like the third
That is
wicket.
correct.
See,
It was Irfan Pathan, Piyush Chawla, and VRV. Yes, against
okay.
Kings 11 Punjab, and I believe it was 2008. That's correct. Yeah.
Wow. See, you remember the
So
most
after-
random, useless pieces.
And
of
once again, I'll remind the listeners. I'd like to remind the listeners another CSK question.
Oh my God, I think there's a pattern emerging here. After 5 rounds, the score stands at 3 for Benny, 1 for Mayank, and 1 for the house. I'm not playing. Okay. Anyway, moving on to the 6th question. Who did McGrath sign for in 2008?
Vivo.
DLF.
Benny got the Vivo again, and Benny.
The legendary but now defunct Delhi Daredevils.
That is correct, and I feel like this is Mayank's question.
See, it's not just
I
CSK.
said DLF. I said DLF, but I just wasn't quick enough, I guess.
You know, this is like Rahani all over again yesterday. The DRS, we did a DRS for the review decision. Sorry, Mayank, I'll keep my ears wide open. So after 6 rounds, 4 for Benny, 1 for Mayank. Okay, question number 7 should be fairly straightforward. How many foreign capitals have won the IPL?
Foreign captains.
How many foreign captains have won the IPL?
DLF.
Mayank.
I'm gonna say 2. David Warner and Shane Warne.
Wrong.
Incorrect, Mayank.
The answer is 3.
That is correct. Mayank, you almost got that one.
The third captain is the great Adam Gilchrist.
That's correct. In 2009,
that's
beating
right.
Deccan Chargers in South Africa.
And you were
After
following the
6
IPL back
rounds.
then, Mayank. No excuses.
Yeah, no excuses, Mayank. and nothing to do with Chennai as
No
well.
excuse
So.
for this one question.
Okay. 5-1 after 6 rounds. Okay, question number after 7 rounds. Sorry. Question number 8. Who has the most number of IPL ducks? Again, who has the most number of ducks?
It might just be best if you give the options for this one. I have no
Wait,
idea.
I'm
I
going to
don't
take a
think
guess
Benny
at
does
this.
either.
Vivo.
Go ahead.
Chris Gale.
Nope, incorrect. Mayank, guesses?
I can't even come up with a guess right now. Rohit Sharma?
I'm gonna have to give that to you. That is actually the correct answer.
Is it?
That is-
Wow.
It is correct answer based on a contingency that it's been shared with Harbhajan Singh, Rohit Sharma, Parthu Patel, and Rahane. All are tied at 13 ducks. So
13.
there you go, Mayank.
Wow.
Well done.
1-3.
1-3. That is
That's a
very
lot
surprising
of
to me,
ducks.
but it's it is a lot of ducks. Nice guess, man. Good work.
Finally, I'm
After
getting
8
into my-
rounds, the score stands at 5 for Benny, 2 for Mayank. Okay, moving on to question number 9. Chris Gale scored his IPL best of 175 runs against which team?
Vivo.
Benny.
It is another great but now defunct team. It was the Pune Warriors.
Oh,
I
that
knew
is
that one.
correct. Oh, Mayank. We need to get you a new buzzer or a new buzzword. 6-2 after 9 rounds. And the final
Whatever.
question.
Pune Warriors, they had a pretty good team. I feel like bad. They had like a lot of weird, like random players, and they still did well, relatively speaking. They were not like great, but
Yeah, I remember Ganguly was the captain, wasn't he? For
Ganguly was
one
captain.
season.
There was like Michael Clark was in there for some reason.
Yeah, it was just like a random concoction of players.
Yeah.
Really, like Steve Smith.
Smith?
I don't know if Steve Smith was there. Steve Smith was for Rising Pune Super Giants, the newer variant of the Pune team. After
Oh,
Pune
okay.
Warriors.
Yes.
Pune Warriors.
I think there was the Kochi Tuskers. I think that was who Steve Smith played for at that time. I think.
It's it's all a blur. You can say random names, and I'll say it's a player. But
Well,
yeah,
you know
since
what?
this is
They're
an
gonna
IPL
have
quiz,
two
let's be
more.
serious.
They're gonna have two more teams from I think 2022 or something like that. So the IPL is again gonna expand to like 10 teams. So yeah, maybe it'll be Pune again,
Hey.
return of the Pune for like the third time.
More opportunity for very niche trivia there. So for our last question of this segment's quiz, who has bowled the most expensive over in IPL?
Vivo.
Okay, Benny.
I can't remember his first name. I know it starts with a P. I think his last name is Parameshwaran. Parameshwaran.
That is in fact correct. It is. It is. We have a winner. A pretty
Pretty conclusive.
Comprehensive, conclusive. It's like.
Guys, I had a strategy. I was gonna do the Australia series type, let him go forward and then have an amazing comeback. Because that I didn't time my
You didn't have time for
buzzword.
Didn't quite this time, Mayank, but I think that's a very sound strategy given India's success there. So I would encourage to stick with it. But yeah, some context surrounding this question. It was Parameswaran who went for 37 in an over in a game against none other than Chris Gale. And some of the close contenders here are Parvinder Avana, who was also conceded 33 runs against Suresh Raina in a qualifier that where I believe Chennai were at chasing a 200 or close to 200 total, and CSK were after 6 overs they reached 100 for 1 or 2. And Suresh Raina was going all kinds of ballistics, scoring 80 of like 20 odd balls. So
was that the semifinal?
And then that was a qualifier.
Oh, right.
Of I think IPL 2012. And then we do have some other 30 plus contendees here. Ravi Bopara won 30 plus runs, and Rahul Sharma also considered 31 runs. There's a common theme here, and that's Chris Gale was the batsman. So it's a hardly surprise.
I remember Rahul Tewatia who scored
The one
30 runs, right? This year, earlier this
That's
year.
correct. Against
Cottrell and
Cottrell, yes.
That was seriously
that came against the run of play as well, because that innings was seemingly going nowhere, and then out of the blue.
I was trolling Rahul Tewatia, and not just me. There were so many of us trolling him because he was like struggling so bad. We were starting to feel bad for him, and we were saying, "Oh, he should retire her. This is so painful to watch, and he must be like mentally just so shot." And then like Cooley hit, the 30 runs in that over, and then he won the game, and then he was like calmly like walking back to the dugout. I was like, who is this guy? What? He's some player.
So after 10 rounds, the final score stands at 7 for Benny, 2 for Mayank, which makes Benny the winner here. But Mayank, don't worry. Our next IPL quiz will be heavily Delhi focused and heavily early Delhi for our in-house Delhi boys here for Mayank and Himanish. So don't worry, I got you, man.
Yeah. By the way, Himanish was not here today, so who knows? This may have ended differently.
I will say though, I was checking on the side, and Steve Smith did play for Pune Warriors India. So he played for both. I wasn't wrong.
There you go. So your IPL history is not shoddy after all.
The key.
These are like your.
The key to remember next time, Nish, when you ask a question, don't say it counts towards the quiz. I think Mayank will get it right. No pressure. Less pressure. Mayank will thrive. that's it for this episode of The Last Wicket. Please do join us again next week as we talk about Himanish's latest article on Cricinfo about how we perceive batting consistency. We will also be having a special guest to talk us through the outcome of the IPL auction later this week. So do subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes, follow us on your social media feeds, and do spread the word about the show. For more details, please visit our website at thelastwicket.com. Once again, thank you for listening, and we hope you come back for more. From all of us here at The Last Wicket, have a great week.